NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The American Central Intelligence Agency has indicated that Iran's nuclear program is in fact severely damaged after the United States' recent strikes on Iran. The CIA further emphasizes it would take years to rebuild, quelling some concerns about the American operation. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization agrees to hike defense spending by 5%. US President Donald Trump calls it a monumental win for America. However, Spain opts out of the spending target, citing social spending cuts as reason for its decision. American and Iranian officials are to hold nuclear talks next week. This announcement comes just days after a 12-day war between Israel and Iran that ended with a ceasefire and appears to be holding for now. US President Donald Trump backs Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and says Netanyahu must be exonerated of his ongoing corruption trial. Trump calls the trial a witch hunt in a long Truth Social post. Our top story today. At the NATO summit in The Hague, member countries agreed to a major boost in defense spending, meeting US President Donald Trump's push for 5% of GDP. Trump called it a monumental win for America and reaffirmed the US commitment to NATO's collective defense under Article 5. The pledge breaks down into 3.5% of GDP for core military spending and 1.5% for broader security, including infrastructure and aid to Ukraine. Spain initially resisted the plan, but signed on after Trump threatened trade action, though Madrid still claims it can meet goals with lower spending. Here's what the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez had to say.
Si hubiéramos aceptado lo que se había propuesto, España tendría que destinar de aquí al año 2035 más de 300.000 millones de euros. ¿De dónde salen esos recursos? ¿De más impuestos a la ciudadanía? ¿De recortes en el sistema de educación, de sanidad, de pensiones? Cuando yo escucho al jefe de la oposición y a la oposición criticar la postura que ha tenido el gobierno de España, me queda claro que si hoy hubiera otro presidente del gobierno, aquí, hoy España habría firmado el 5% del Producto Interior Bruto en defensa. Y eso sería un absoluto error para España.
The move offers Trump a clear political victory while giving flexibility to Europe's tighter budgets. At the summit, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky played a lower-profile role, but met with Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Trump said his meeting with Zelensky couldn't have been nicer. Zelensky called it substantive. Starmer said momentum from the summit would push more support for Ukraine. Trump also revealed he's in talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin, hinting at progress on Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called Ukraine's membership bid irreversible, but Trump kept any such commitment out of the summit's final declaration. Despite initial doubts, Trump embraced the alliance's unity, saying it wouldn't function without the US's leadership, but now it will because they're paying more. We're now joined by our we move on. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed an agreement with the Council of Europe's human rights body to establish a special tribunal. This tribunal will prosecute top Russian officials responsible for the crime of aggression in the invasion of Ukraine. Let's hear what the Secretary General of the Council of Europe had to say.
Ukraine and the Council of Europe are signing an agreement to establish the special tribunal for the crime of aggression. Tribunal to judge between victims and aggressors, between impunity and accountability. Because without accountability, there can be no lasting peace for Ukraine and Europe as a whole.
Zelensky urged justice and accountability over Russian, quote, crimes of aggression. Let's hear what Zelensky had to say about Putin.
Today's agreement to create the tribunal is just the beginning, and now we must take real steps to make it work. And it will take strong political and legal cooperation to make sure every Russian war criminal faces justice, including Putin.
Meanwhile, US President Trump may send more Patriot missiles to Ukraine after meeting with Ukrainian President. He said he'll speak soon with Putin as Zelensky wants to end the war. This marks a historic move, as it would be the first time the Council of Europe has set up such a tribunal. While the location of the tribunal has not yet been determined, the Council of Europe, which includes 46 member states, such as Ukraine, Turkey and the United Kingdom, has made it clear that this body will focus on prosecuting senior leaders for their role in the invasion. Russia, expelled from the Council following the invasion, is not part of this process. And analysts say that this tribunal addresses a critical gap, filling the jurisdictional limits of the International Criminal Court and ensuring accountability for those at the highest levels of leadership. We're now joined by Jim Rice, who's a professor of international law located in Vigan, the Philippines. Jim, thank you very much for joining us on the program. I first of all want to talk about this new pledge, the 5% GDP pledge, which it seems that Donald Trump has put forward, let's say. Do you think this 5% GDP pledge represents renewed unity or just renewed pressure from Washington, Jim?
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. The last thing that you mentioned was a little bit garbled. Could you please repeat that?
I said
just the last.
I said, do you think this the GDP pledge, the 5% GDP pledge, represents unity throughout NATO, or is it just renewed pressure, diplomatic pressure from Washington?
Yes, in part. I will recall that these kind of statements have been made as early as during the Obama administration, when Obama was urging the NATO members, the other NATO members, to contribute more in their defense spending. So yes, I would agree, but I would say it's not only Trump that's done that.
Yeah, and Jim, is Donald Trump's threat to Spain with trade, is that a sign of effective leadership, or is that coercive diplomacy, do you think?
Clearly it's coercive diplomacy. It's not effective leadership. And ultimately, I don't think it's very, it's a very good way of, dealing with one's friends, especially such public statements and threats. But it's typical Trump, I gotta say.
And what about the poorer NATO countries that are involved in this alliance? 32 European countries in NATO, some of which are relatively poorer countries. Do you think they'll realistically to be able to meet this 5% goal? It doesn't sound like much, but we're talking about billions and billions of dollars here of their annual GDP. Do you think this is will just lead to creative accounting?
I agree. I think it will be difficult for many nations in NATO, even including the United Kingdom, to meet these 5% targets, given the pressures that their budgets are under right now. But if I could just add, I'm very pleased to see that one good thing that has come out of this NATO conference has been this statement that you just read from Zelensky about the need for accountability for Russia's war crimes in the war against Ukraine.
Yes. What's your thoughts on this new tribunal that has been set up? Russia has been expelled from it, and it's been set up in order for Russia to be prosecuted and all the individuals to be prosecuted for their alleged war crimes. What are your thoughts, Jim?
this is a good development and it's absolutely necessary. I believe that it was the right step for the European nations to have taken, and I really hope and I believe that Russian officials, including Russian officers and indeed soldiers, can and will be held accountable before the International Criminal Court.
Jim Rice, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We move on now. President Donald Trump is defending the US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites amid growing questions over their actual impact and reports Iran may have moved enriched uranium. Facing leaked intelligence suggesting the nuclear program was only set back a few months and not destroyed, Trump called the assessment flat out wrong and lashed out at the media. Trump said 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs obliterated Fordo and other sites. However, US officials now say that Iran's uranium stockpile might still be intact and possibly relocated before the strikes. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt insisted that there was no indication that Iran moved enriched uranium ahead of the bombing. However, CIA Chief John Ratcliffe claimed facilities were damaged beyond repair. The IAEA says it lost visibility of Iran's nuclear materials the moment hostilities began, but hasn't confirmed the uranium was moved or hidden. Meanwhile, tensions persist. Iran says it arrested 26 people linked to Israel for sabotage during the 12-day war, while Israeli commandos reportedly operated inside Iran during the fighting. Iranian officials say the war united their people and foiled Israel's hopes of regime change. Tehran insists it emerged stronger militarily and politically and is ready for future retaliation. We move over to Lebanon now, where UNIFIL peacekeeping faces challenges as its mandate nears expiry. Meanwhile, the Lebanese army arrested an ISIS leader, recovering weapons and drone equipment. The head of Israel's military, Eyal Zamir, says that Israeli commandos had operated secretly inside Iran during the country's 12-day war. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
לאחר 12 ימים של לחימה חסרת תקדים, אני יכול לומר, צה"ל פעל במיטבו ועמד באופן מלא בתכלית ובמטרות המבצע. לאחר שנים של הכנות ובתום חודשים של היערכות דקדקנית ומואצת בצה"ל, מכת הפתיחה שלנו הייתה מפתיעה ומכריעה. מכת הפתיחה הוציאה את האויב בשיווי משקל והיוותה מרכיב מרכזי בהישגי המערכה כולה. פגענו בכל המטרות שתכננו ואף מעבר לכך.
At the NATO summit, Trump said Israel and Iran are, quote, exhausted, but admitted the conflict could restart someday, maybe soon. NATO allies backed his push to raise defense spending to 5% by 2035. And Vice President J.D. Vance says the US will hold talks with Iran in the coming weeks, hoping to control remaining nuclear fuel and prevent future escalation. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, both sides claim victory, but as strategic propaganda mounts, the real question remains. Was this a turning point or just a pause before another storm? We're now joined by Professor Madhav. US President Donald Trump has weighed in on ending the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza as a new ceasefire push begins more than 20 months after the conflict started. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think great progress is being made on Gaza. I think because of this attack that we made, I think we're going to have some very good news. I think great progress is being made on Gaza.
Opposition politicians, relatives of hostages held in Gaza, and even members of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition are increasing their pressure on him to end the fighting triggered by Hamas's October the 7th attack. We move on to a related development. Israel has said that 7 soldiers have been killed in Gaza in an attack on their armoured vehicle in one of the deadliest incidents for its forces in the more than 20-month war. The troops were operating in the southern city of Khan Yunis when their vehicle caught fire after assailants attached an explosive device to it, as per the IDF. The army has said that another soldier was seriously wounded in a separate incident in Khan Yunis, and it gave no further details. However, Hamas claimed on its Telegram channel it had ambushed Israeli soldiers taking cover inside a residential building. The army's website listed the names of the 7 soldiers, including a platoon commander from the battalion who fell during combat in the southern Gaza Strip. Reacting on this, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it was a difficult day for the people of Israel in a message on social media. At least 4 Palestinians, including a teenager, have been killed in the occupied West Bank in an attack by Israeli settlers, Israeli troops, as per reports. The teenager was reportedly shot by Israeli forces, while the other 3 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli settler attack on the town of Kafar Malek in northeast of Ramallah. The report suggests that dozens of Israeli settlers attacked the town, burning vehicles and homes as residents of neighbouring villages attempted to confront them. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said it treated at least 5 wounded Palestinians who suffered gunshot wounds, with some in serious condition, following the death of the teen. In an post on X, the Vice President of Palestine called for international community's intervention to protect its people. We're now joined by Madhav Nalapat, who's the editor of the Sunday Guardian, located in New Delhi, to discuss this in more detail. Professor Nalapat, I want to start with these Trump statements. He says that progress is going very, very well in regards to a ceasefire. What are your thoughts on the current state of the war in Gaza now that these hostilities between Israel and Iran seem to be simmering down?
Well, I'd like to say that the Israelis have suffered casualties. It's very unfortunate. But having said that, I think for them the war is existential. The fact is that Hamas, Hezbollah, and the IRGC are direct threats to the entire Jewish people. And I don't see Israel stopping until it eliminates that threat. I mean, in the last century, they were, there was a little bit of doubt and skepticism whether threats of elimination will be carried out. And unfortunately, in the first half of that century, in a horrible way, they were very substantially. So having gone through that experience, every Israeli has got that in his or her mind. And I don't believe that they are going to stop until this existential threat is removed.
No, of course. And obviously we've just seen these 7 Israeli troops killed today. A lot of critics of Netanyahu's war in Gaza claim that Hamas has in fact been defeated and that Israel continues to bombard them even though their ruling party has been destroyed. What does this event tell us about that?
Look, I'd like to say that Hamas had a free run from around 2005 to that horrible attack on October 7. But the reality of the situation is that during that time, a lot of young people in Gaza were indoctrinated with this doctrine that the Jewish community should cease to exist. And therefore, unfortunately, a whole generation of this kind of anti-Jewish individuals have come up. So it's a difficult task. And as for the soldiers being killed, well, every soldier's life lost is a huge loss for a small country like Israel. But the fact is that nowadays you have to use technology, you have to use means other than troops on the ground. And I think the Israelis will have to get that lesson and ensure there are less troops on the ground and more use of technology. I want to say that I'm not optimistic of this particular situation ending anytime soon. And as far as Iran is concerned, of course, they will do all kinds of camouflage reality is their nuclear program was severely set back. What we saw as a convoy of trucks was actually a convoy of sand trucks. And people said it was fissile material being carried out. You don't carry out fissile material except under extreme safeguards, and you don't bring it to surface in that manner. So it was actually sandbags in a very good deception operation. I'd like to say that whatever the deception operations, the fact is Netanyahu and Trump are united on one thing, and that is the need to end the existential threat to the Jewish people. I'm not simply talking of the state of Israel. I'm talking of the Jewish people. I think they are completely united on that, and I think world opinion also, when they come face to face with what the alternative is and what the planned alternative is, I think world opinion will also be largely on their side.
Professor Nalapat, I now want to move over to this reports of violence in the West Bank by Israeli settlers on Palestinians. For viewers that don't know, the West Bank is separate to the Gaza Strip, but another Palestinian territory which Israelis have occupied. The international community sees this as illegal. Why do you think that settler violence is increasing in the West Bank?
Look, I think the settler violence is increasing, and I quite think that they are a great asset to Iran, to Hezbollah, and to Hamas, because they are doing unspeakable acts against Palestinians who, frankly, the Palestinian Authority accepted the right of the Jewish people, accepted the state of Israel. So, but unfortunately, it's neither Hamas nor Hezbollah that's been given attention until that terrible terror attack, but the Palestinian Authority who accepted the right of the Jewish people and the right of Israel to accept. So I think, frankly, this kind of violence is unacceptable. It has got to be put down with a firm hand. Netanyahu removed all the settlements from Gaza, frankly, in a move, and thereafter he took his eye off Gaza. And what Gaza was, a hotbed for breeding terrorists, a hotbed for breeding anti-Jewish sentiment. He took his eye off that particular danger, and I think he cannot neglect this danger, the fact that the settlers are acting as a propaganda weapon for those who hate the Jewish people, and are basically calling them typical representatives of the Jewish people, when that's extremely far from the truth. So yes, I fully agree that this kind of violence needs to be curbed, and there needs to be accountability for that, and they have to be held accountable for that. And I think if Netanyahu does not find the moral courage to do that, well, the fact is that he has basically given a big boost to the Hamas, Hezbollah, IRGC, and other such groups that do not accept the right of Jewish people to exist. The settlers do not represent the Jewish people in any form or fashion. They're very different. They seem to be mimicking, if I'm sorry to say, they seem to be mimicking the elements of Hamas and Hezbollah in their activities, and they need to be put down with a very firm hand. There needs to be very strict accountability, legal action against them, and police action against them within Israel itself, if Israel is to secure itself properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Nalapat, please stay with us. We have some more information coming out of the region. US President Donald Trump has come out in support of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that his ongoing trial should be stopped. In a long post on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump said the charges against Netanyahu are politically motivated and unfair. Trump said he is shocked that Netanyahu is still facing trial, particularly after the Israel-Iran 12-day conflict that he described as one of Israel's greatest moments. He further praised Netanyahu's leadership and called him a warrior who helped fight Iran. Trump criticized the Israeli legal system for continuing what he called a horror show of a trial. Netanyahu has been under investigation since 2020. He's accused of accepting tens of thousands of dollars worth of cigars and champagne from a billionaire Hollywood producer in exchange for helping him with business interests. He is also charged with advocating for advantageous US relations for media tycoons in return for positive publicity for himself and his family. Madhav Nalapat, I want to come back to you just for one final question. What are your thoughts on Trump in some ways calling out the Israeli legal system and saying that Benjamin Netanyahu's trial should be stopped? This has been a 5-year investigation. Israeli prime ministers have gone to jail before for these kind of charges. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump saying, criticizing the Israeli judicial process like he is doing?
If you check back my writings, you will find that I have consistently argued that this kind of charge against Netanyahu should be dropped, and he should be given a completely pardon, the way Biden, for example, pardoned himself and his family. He should be given a complete pardon by the Israeli president, and the sooner the Israeli president does that, the better. The reality is that what he has done, regarding this war on terror, what he has done regarding existential threats to Israel is absolutely noteworthy. It is well deserving of a pardon, and you cannot use lawfare against political opponents. Unfortunately, in many countries in the world, what happens is they use the legal system against political opponents when they can't defeat them politically. We have seen that in France, for example.
Professor Nalapat, this trial has been going on since before the war in Gaza started. As we've cited previously, it started in 2020. And also he is being charged with corruption charges. That includes accepting tens of thousands of dollars worth in champagne and cigars from this very powerful Hollywood former Israeli producer. Do you think that's worthy of a pardon of the crimes he's committed of, his actions in Gaza and his war with Iran?
Look, let's be fair. Yes, he may have committed, I didn't know he was that much of a guzzler of champagne. Thank you for telling me. But the fact is, when you weigh the scales, you have to weigh what he has, some of the things that he has done which are negative, and a lot of the things he has done which are positive. And the positive is much more since this particular war erupted, as Donald Trump says, 12 days ago. And in 12 days, the IRGC has been, frankly, in very, very bad shape. They're reduced to propaganda images of sandbags being moved out in the pretense of nuclear material. So the reality is, yes, I fully agree he did wrong. I fully agree that that this is true. At the same time, you weigh that against the immense good that he has done in the kind of strong action he has taken, which only he, in my view, could have taken. And I think if you put it that way, Netanyahu deserves a pardon from President Herzog.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us on the program. For our next story, we move over to the African continent, where 16 people died during an anti-government protest across Kenya, on most killed by police. According to Amnesty Kenya, thousands marched to mark last year's deadly tax bill demonstrations as police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse crowds in the capital of Nairobi. Amnesty Kenya and the National Human Rights Commission verified the death toll, with at least 5 shot dead. The Commission also reported over 400 casualties, including demonstrators, police and journalists, citing excessive use of force, and Kenya's police spokesperson refused to comment on the reports. Police oversight authorities confirmed 61 arrests nationwide. Kenyatta International Hospital received and treated over 100 people, most with gunshot injuries, according to a hospital official. Kenya Power said gunmen killed one of its security guards during the unrest. Earlier, crowds marched towards State House as local channels NTV and KTN broadcast the scenes live, defying a ban on coverage. A Nairobi court later suspended that ban, allowing both stations to resume broadcasting. We now move over to North America, where gunmen opened fire during a religious festival in Irapuato, central Mexico, killing 11 and injuring at least 20 amid ongoing gang violence. The attack struck during celebrations for the Nativity of John the Baptist, with bloodstains and bullet holes making the chaotic aftermath. Victims include a 17-year-old, 8 men and 2 women. Locals rushed to the wounded to hospitals in private cars. And President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned the shooting as deplorable and confirmed an investigation is underway, calling it a confrontation without elaborating. Authorities are hunting the perpetrators while support is being provided to traumatized residents. The region, plagued by turf wars between Santa Rosa de Lima and Jalisco cartels, remains Mexico's deadliest state. Well, that's all we have time for, and we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.